What is more loyal than a friend, but also as sticky as chewing gum? At first glance, the question may seem strange. Well, okay, it is strange. It was asked of me by a drunk friend in the middle of a New Year's Eve party. Let's just say it quickly left my mind. And yet, as short and abstract as it is, it has the merit of resonating with my situation. Before getting to the heart of the matter, let me tell you more about it. I am a director of shadow plays, also known as shadow puppetry. These are those famous silhouettes that you create using your body or objects. For my part, I have chosen to prioritize the use of my hands. This choice is partly motivated by the simplicity of the process. Obviously, I don't limit myself to just this field. Some of my shows use paper silhouettes or involve real actors. Nevertheless, shadow play is my great specialty. What was initially just a passion quickly became my livelihood. In summary, I had everything to be happy. Yes, I had. A few months. It took just a few months for everything to fall apart. This burning passion I had nurtured turned into a real nightmare. To be honest, I even hesitated to tell you this story. Yet I desperately need it. I need to get this off my chest, or I'll go crazy. And therefore, I invite you not to waste any time, and to start with the first incident. I was in my room when it happened. That's where I usually create and rehearse my shows. Consider yourself lucky not to sleep there. Between the clothes on the bed, the trash on the floor, and the screen in the middle of the room, I still wonder how it could work under those conditions. Despite everything, I managed to find my way through this mess. Shutters closed and lights off. I turned on my projector, directed it towards the screen, and got to work. I had to prepare a shadow puppet show for a very busy cabaret. It was scheduled for the next day and might boost my career. Let's just say I couldn't afford to mess up and had to make a strong impression. So I started by warming up with the basics. Dog, bird, duck, rabbit. Nothing too tricky for someone like me. As time went by, the silhouettes became increasingly complex. Snail, kangaroo, panther. The shadowy shapes flowed across the screen as darkness surrounded me. I then had fun making silhouettes of my own. A Native American, a cowboy, two lovers kissing. The kind of things that testify to my dedication to my art. The position of the fingers, the consideration of perspective, the fluidity of the movements. Everything was under control. It was at the moment of forming yet another silhouette that something strange happened. The shadow of my hands no longer appeared on the screen. At first, I attributed it to fatigue, so I started again, thinking I must have just been hallucinating. However, all my attempts proved unsuccessful. The outline of my hands was always missing on the screen. I gradually started to suspect the projector's lighting. Who knows? Maybe I had adjusted the settings without realizing it. Meh. To be honest, I was fooling myself about what was happening to me. Still, after checking, the settings seemed correct. I even unplugged it and then plugged it back in to make sure everything was fine. Despite everything, I had to face the facts. There was nothing wrong with the projector. That's when I quickly suspected an issue with the screen. Yes, I know. It's even less likely than the projector. I told you, I didn't want to believe what was happening to me. So, I lifted the spotlight by its tripod and pointed it towards the door of my room. I had ruled out everything that could be responsible for this situation. It could only work. I was convinced of it. However, my last attempt proved me wrong and also ended in failure. The shadow of my hands had simply vanished. I oscillated between fear and frustration. The idea of losing my shadow was inconceivable to me. This sensation was similar to losing a limb. I even hit the projector a few times, even though I had already dismissed that possibility. That shows you how desperate I was. While I was already at my wit's end, I had the idea to stand between the beam of light and the door. I didn't expect much from it, but I was on the verge of having a panic attack. Yet, as astonishing as it may be, it worked. My shadow was back on the door. I can tell you that I was relieved it had come back. Obviously, I was curious to know what had happened, but I was happy that the problem was resolved. At least, that's what I thought. As I was holding my head in my hands, something quickly caught my attention. At first, I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong. I felt a kind of discomfort that I couldn't shake off. Finally, it was by looking at the door that it clicked in my mind. My shadow, it was not the same. While my arms were at the level of my face, those of my shadow rested along my body. What I saw made no sense. I was both frightened and fascinated by this anomaly. Nevertheless, my interest in the phenomenon was quickly overshadowed by my fear. So I decided to shake my arms in all directions to see if my shadow would change or not. Unfortunately, that was not the case. My shadow didn't move an inch on the door. My stress quickly escalated. There was no way I was going to be stuck with a frozen shadow until my death. My job and, by extension, my life depended on it. So I did something that was, admittedly, ridiculous, but that anyone would do in my situation. I talked to it. I kept shaking my hand in front of it, begging it to move. That's when something completely unexpected happened. My shadow, which until then had been motionless, suddenly raised its arm to wave hello to me. Seeing that, my only reflex was to jump back. This gesture caused me to trip over the projector cable and drag it down with me. The next moment, I found myself lying on the floor, dazed by the violence of the impact. The spotlight, on the other hand, lay behind me and illuminated my entire body. As I lifted my head, I saw my shadow, crouched, shaking its hand. Out of fear, I started crawling towards the wall behind me to get away from it. In hindsight, I realized that it's strange to run away from one's shadow. On the other hand, I was panicked by what I saw, and I was right to be. My shadow was now gigantic and was staring at me, tilting its head to the side. I don't know if the comparison is relevant, but I felt like an ant being watched by a man. Still, it and I engaged in the longest staring contest of my life. At least, that's how it felt to me. However, I quickly realized that it was waiting for a reaction from me. So I gathered my courage and broke the silence that had settled in my room. "Are you alive?" As cliché as this question may be, it had the merit of making my shadow react. In response, it simply raised its thumb as if to say, yes. As I replaced the projector, I slowly stood up and then asked him further questions. "Do you want to harm me?" This question was more legitimate than the previous one. This time it answered negatively by shaking its index finger from left to right. Seeing that, the pressure eased, and I started to move closer to the door. As I did so, my shadow gradually returned to its normal size, which made it much less threatening. When I finally arrived at the entrance, I placed my hand on it and examined it from every angle. It was at that moment that I voiced the only important question in my mind. How can this be possible? In response, my shadow shrugged. After that, I just remember staring at it for hours without moving. Since that day, it hasn't stopped making its presence known. Most of the time, it was to get my attention and have me talk to it. So, of course, it always made sure there was no one around to do it. Yet, I was always afraid that someone would notice or that I would be caught talking to him. That's why, over time, I implemented certain strategies to anticipate these scenarios. To give you an example, I avoided sunny places or those lit by streetlights as much as possible. I always moved through dark and poorly lit alleys. Of course, it had its drawbacks, and I had to adapt certain aspects of my life accordingly. Despite everything, I was quite satisfied with this system. At least no one would think I was crazy or anything like that. I admit that at first I found it burdensome to live with my shadow. I don't know about you, but I hate it when someone constantly looks over my shoulder. Whether at home or elsewhere, I didn't have a single moment of privacy to myself. Nevertheless, I eventually got used to it and even came to appreciate his presence. It was like having a pleasant roommate, except he doesn't pay rent and he doesn't talk. Beyond that, it was quite candid, but could sometimes be mischievous. In fact, it was its teasing that helped me get to know it better. One day, I caught it holding the shadow of a pillow. Yes, you heard that right. It was able to grasp it like anyone would with an object. The pillow started floating in the air until it threw its shadow in my direction. I can tell you that I had a good laugh when it hit me in the face. I assure you, it happened that it was helpful in various ways. By reaching for something high up, putting away the dishes, helping me push something heavy. I believe that deep down it made it happy to support me. In short, it was the most symbiotic relationship there could be. My story could have ended there. A shadow endowed with consciousness but seemingly harmless. It was strange, but there was no reason to be alarmed either. It should have stopped there. There was one thing I dreaded more than anything about my shadow, that it would intervene during one of my shows. I allowed her to design them with me, but that was where it ended. That was the only rule it had to follow. During the first few months, it refrained from doing so. I therefore thought, naively, that it would never happen. Unfortunately, the universe proved me wrong a few days ago. This time, it was about performing in a body shadow show. For those who are wondering, yes, I am also an actor in addition to being a director. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but let's say that sometimes I like being on stage instead of staying backstage. Some will say it's pathetic, and I understand them. For my part, I know how to set my ego aside to work in the service of one of my colleagues. Anyway, it was just a detail. The most important thing was that I was going to perform one of the hottest plays in the region. Originally, I wasn't even supposed to participate in the show. It was after the lead actor broke his leg that the director decided to contact me. He had already heard about my performances and knew that I had trained as an actor. I was therefore the ideal person to replace the injured actor. It was clearly an opportunity not to be missed. This play was going to be seen by very influential critics. If my performance was good, I could be sure that would open many more doors for me. It's the kind of thing that can make a difference, especially for an artist of my stature. Despite that, my place wasn't guaranteed, and I still had to audition. Thank God, everything went well. I got the role without any difficulty, which allowed me to be optimistic about my future. Unfortunately, all of that was jeopardized the day I crossed paths with Marcus. He was the biggest jerk I had ever met. He had a high opinion of himself and treated others like crap. He was constantly playing the diva and harassing the technical team for the slightest whim. In his eyes, everyone had to bow down to him and fulfill his every whim. Yet, no one was fooled by him. We all knew very well why he had been chosen, and, spoiler alert, it was absolutely not for his acting talent. Oh yes, it's easy to have a supporting role when Daddy funds the play. That's actually why he targeted me. He couldn't stand not having the lead role. He kept threatening me verbally to make me leave the play. Of course, he did it discreetly, but I assure you, if he could have, it would have come to blows. On my side, I didn't retaliate. As I said before, I couldn't afford it. And he knew it very well. This little game went on throughout all the rehearsals. A month of hell where I had to endure the pressure inflicted by that asshole. I don't know by what miracle, but I managed to hold on until the big day. I told myself that he would leave me alone during the show, that he wouldn't make a scene at such a critical moment. It turned out I was completely wrong. While everyone was in a rush before the curtain rose, he waited until I was alone to talk to me. His sneaky look said a lot about his intentions. "So, you've decided to stay? I had told you to get the hell out of here." "Get off my back, Marcus. Aren't you tired of bothering me every day?" "What are you talking about? I'm just trying to help you. A piece of advice. Let it go, my friend. You don't have the stature for this role. This play is serious. It's not meant for second-rate actors like you." Second-rate? Say that again for me to hear. Excuse me, I misspoke. I'm just saying it would be in your best interest to leave. And you're telling me this now? An hour before the premiere? All right, listen. Here's what we're going to do. You will tell the director that you don't feel well, or that you have an emergency. Anyway, you find a credible excuse to leave. And in exchange, I will make sure your career remains intact. And who will replace you, you big smart aleck? Don't worry. The director has everything planned. Anyway, he will be forced to give me the lead role. I had forgotten your father. You see, my plan is well rehearsed, and everyone benefits. I'll take over your role, and you can go back to your shadow puppet shows. It's called Ombromania. Meh, if you want. So then, what do you say? Not a chance. Not only are you hindering my chances of advancement, but on top of that, you are threatening to destroy my career. If you think I'm going to give in to your blackmail, you're sorely mistaken. To my great surprise, he started to laugh. Ascension? Career? Get back down to earth, my friend. All you do is wave your hands in front of a screen. Even a kid could do it. At what point in your shitty life did you convince yourself that this would open doors for you? Come on, do what I say, and we won't talk about it anymore. Consider yourself lucky that I'm letting you continue your lousy shows. Hearing that, I clenched my fist. I had a furious urge to punch him in the face. Instead, I replied to him sharply. "Go fuck yourself, you piece of shit. You can keep running for all I care, but I'm not giving you my spot." After saying that, the expression on my face changed. His mocking smile was quickly replaced by a grimace of anger. He then approached me in a threatening manner. "Okay, you don't want to play it like that. No problem. I wanted to be nice, but you leave me no choice. I'm going to make your life a living hell, you little shit. You can already say goodbye to your career. I'm going to make you out to be a pariah in the eyes of the entire profession. No one will want you anymore, and you'll end up on the street like the bum you've always been. So enjoy this show, because it will be the last time you step on stage." After that, he turned around to head towards his dressing room. I didn't even dare to threaten him back. I saw in his eyes that he wasn't joking. Yet I was holding myself back with all my strength to avoid jumping on him. As I was watching Marcus leave, I caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye. So I instinctively looked at the illuminated wall to my left. It was my shadow. Except it was different. Something was wrong with it. It looked darker, both literally and figuratively. It then did something that didn't help my situation. It picked up the shadow of an accessory located at my feet. After that, everything happened very quickly. The accessory began to float while my shadow held hers in its hand. Seeing that, I immediately knew what it was planning to do. So I tried to dissuade it by whispering, "I beg you, don't do that." Unfortunately, it didn't work. The next second, I saw it throw it at full speed in Marcus's direction. The accessory mimicked his shadow and landed right on his head. He immediately let out a cry of pain before turning towards me. "Piece of shit!" He was furious. He then rushed towards me to grab me by my collar. At the moment he was about to hit me, the director appeared behind him. He had undoubtedly been alerted by Marcus's scream. "Can I know what's going on here?" He was accompanied by 2 members of the technical team. In their presence, Marcus quickly calmed down. "Nothing. We were just talking." "Right." I wanted to avoid problems at all costs, so I acted as if nothing had happened. "He is right. We were just talking. That's all." The director did not try to understand the situation. "I couldn't care less. The first one is in an hour, and I see that you're still not in costume. What are you waiting for? The flood? Hurry up before I kick you in the ass. And you lot, get back to work. This isn't a spa here." With those words, everyone returned to their tasks. Before leaving, Marcus gave me one last warning. "Enjoy your performance. It will be your swan song." After all that, I was able to breathe in silence. I then turned to my shadow to gently give it a moral lesson. "I know you wanted to help me, but you must never do it again. It could get me into a lot of trouble, and I don't need that right now. Can you do this for me? Please?" The shadow didn't react at all. "I'll take that as a yes. Stay calm, and everything will be fine." I then went to get ready for the start of the play. The first part of the show went quite well. I must say I was in my element. The darkness of the room, the silence of the audience, me in front of the screen, the projector lit behind me. Apart from the sophisticated sets, there was nothing unusual. In addition to that, I knew my lines by heart, and my gestures were quite good. If I were to be poetic, I would say that my shadow danced on the screen. I even took a certain pleasure in it. I must say that it had been a long time since I created body silhouettes. I think deep down I missed it a little. In any case, everything was going smoothly. Well, that was until Marcus and I were both on stage. We were supposed to play a philosophical discussion between two friends. The action took place in a living room with a subdued atmosphere and dim lighting. I had to make a superhuman effort to focus on my lines. Standing next to him made me want to vomit. I regretted not giving him a good kick in the groin. That was all he deserved. In hindsight, I think it was because of my anger that things got out of hand. While he was speaking, I heard some people in the audience whispering to each other. At first, I didn't pay attention until I heard someone ask what I was doing. I didn't immediately understand what they were talking about. It was by observing the screen that I grasped the source of their concern. My shadow was even darker than in the wings and clearly wanted to settle the score with Marcus. Without warning, it lifted its foot to crush the shadows. The next moment, he gritted his teeth while looking me in the eyes. He was angry and was trying his best to mumble something to me. "What the hell are you doing, damn it?" I then delivered my lines while keeping an eye on my shadow. Unfortunately, it didn't stop there. Before I even realized it, it punched Marcus in the face, causing him to fall to the ground. Some people in the audience started to laugh. They surely thought that all of this was part of the show. In the distance, I saw the director asking me what was happening. The expression on his face conveyed his confusion. On his part, Marcus was trying his best to get back up. He didn't stop glaring at me. If he could have spoken, I'm sure he would have insulted me with every name. I was overwhelmed by the situation and paralyzed by embarrassment. I had no idea how to react at all. Whether I panicked or did nothing, I was going to be kicked out of the show anyway. Everything was becoming confusing in my head, to the point where I could have fainted on the spot. Suddenly, time froze around me. I could hear neither the director's nor the audience's laughter. My head was turned towards the screen, watching in astonishment what was unfolding before my eyes. My shadow raised its hand towards Marcus's silhouette. The movement was so slow that it seemed decomposed. It then extended its index and middle fingers, joining them together before curling the rest of its fingers. Fear engulfed my entire being. I knew what was going to happen, but I didn't want to believe it. So I closed my eyes, praying to wake up from this nightmare. Then, a deafening bang echoed through the room. When I opened my eyes, all I saw was Marcus's body bathing in his blood, his head blown apart. Red stains on the screen attested to the violence of his death. The audience began to scream and run in all directions. Everyone was trying to get out of the theater as quickly as possible. Some even shoved others to rush towards the emergency exits. On my part, I stood there staring at Marcus's corpse. I still didn't recognize what had just happened. At first, I thought it was all a bad dream, but gradually I grasped the magnitude of the tragedy. If my feet hadn't been glued to the ground, I think I would have curled up on the floor. To tell you the truth, the last thing I remember is my shadow clapping in a macabre manner at what it had just done. Later, I was arrested as the main suspect in this murder case. However, they found neither weapon nor bullet on Marcus's body. Even the shell casing was absent from the crime scene. Without all this evidence, they were forced to release me, and the case was closed without further action. Today, I live in complete darkness and no longer leave my house. I have also given up my career. I no longer want my shadow to be exposed to any light whatsoever. I would like to avoid the aforementioned events from happening again. Anyway, no one wants to hear about me anymore. To conclude, I would like to have your opinion on the following question. What do you think is most ironic? That I feel lonely even with my shadow? Or that I am a shadow man who is afraid of it? I'll let you ponder that